we get the email from that agency that, hey, we've had a misappropriation of assets. All of your money is gone. And but stick with us.
That experience reshaped how Monroe approached every decision that came next and clarified what truly matters when choosing support. Because after something like that, you don't look for promises. You look for clarity, transparency, and people who take responsibility for the entire journey. Monroe has now completed 2 surrogacy journeys, and the difference the second time wasn't luck or timing. It was working with a team that communicated clearly, operated ethically and transparently, and stayed present from start to finish. That support changed how the entire journey felt.
There was never weeks or months of gaps where I'm sitting there wondering, what's the next step? Who's on first here?
In this episode, Monroe shares what he learned through experience, how working with ethical, transparent support changed his journey, what stood out once he lived both sides of the process, and how the right partnership helped restore confidence after a difficult experience. If you're researching surrogacy and want to move forward feeling informed and supported, this conversation is for you. Enjoy. Okay, Monroe, I really have been excited to have this conversation because I feel like your story just really shows how different a surrogacy journey can feel depending on the support that you have around you. And I know you've lived both sides of that. So I would love if we can start there. Just what does it feel like? You have baby Lauren, sweet big sister Allison. What does it feel like knowing how different this journey was compared to your first journey?
Yes. So the 2 journeys, before I even get into the differences, I want to say we worked with 2 different surrogates. And for purposes of this discussion, I'm going to refer to them as surrogates, but I know that if you're speaking the industry lingo, surrogate can imply a traditional surrogate situation. So we use gestational carriers, just to be clear with that. But the 2 surrogates we worked with were dreams come true. And so that is the one through line consistency. But to your point, Whitney, we worked with 2 different agencies. We worked with Egg Donor Surrogate Solutions for our second journey. And the agency isn't everything in the journey, but I'll say I gave the agency a call in August of 24, just to put some time around it. And by October of 25, in September of 25, we were heading to the hospital to anticipate and welcome the birth of our daughter. So that gives a flavor of how efficient things can be. When I was first educating myself on surrogacy, and I've listened to a few of the podcast episodes to educate myself on kind of the format, but a theme I was hearing is it's a marathon, not a sprint. I definitely wanted it to be a sprint. And I think a lot of parents come into this process.
And most do.
want it to be a sprint, right? And so this journey really did show me it can go as fast as a parent may hope. A lot of that, is out of the agency's control. But what is in the agency's control, what I found here with Egg Donor Surrogate Solutions, was things just happened as quickly as I wanted them to, or as efficiently. There was never weeks or months of gaps where I'm sitting there wondering, what's the next step? Who's on first here? So I really appreciated that with what I found at this agency. And I'm so grateful that you all guided us and our wonderful surrogate to the finish line. So as you can hear, I have a healthy baby sitting next to me. And she's just I can hardly believe that all of this has happened. And one more point, Whitney, and then I'll give you the floor back. But when I called the agency back in August of 24, we had just completed our first journey. We had just gotten home from the hospital. That journey took 5 years. So I figured we want to do 2. Let's start number 2 is right now, and we'll see how long it takes. And having just completed a journey, I think I was speaking with Meg from the agency at the time, and she said, hey, I know you're just starting with Egg Donor Surrogate Solutions, but we'd love to have you on the podcast to share your perspective on the journey that you just completed with a different agency. And I remember saying, even at that time, and this gets to this idea of parents coming into this with some sense of being guarded, some sense of doubt, some disbelief that this could actually work. And I said, you get me through this second journey, and I will come onto the podcast. And even as I said that, I remember thinking, that's a check I will never have to cash, because there's no way this can work. And at that point, if anyone had a reason to believe that surrogacy could work, right, I just completed a successful journey. You'd think that I would have had a different outlook. But even then, I had doubts that this could be as wonderful as it turned out to be. And as a man of my word, here I am to join the podcast, and it's a very cathartic experience to be here with you. So thanks for having me.
Oh, well, I love that. And also, I mean, again, shout out to Meg for just being like, of course it's going to work. And yes, this is going to be the best thing to talk about. I love that. I want to go back because, we joke and we do say it's a marathon, not a sprint, in the sense of when I'm saying it, it's we dot our I's, we cross our T's, we make sure that things are going to go well. And we don't want to rush because we don't want, to make mistakes. But 5 years?
5 years. Yes. 5 years. And I did, prior to this, make a little timeline to make sure that I'm keeping myself honest on it. But it was 5 years. And the timing was unfortunate as well. I mean, we started the process in January of 2020. That was when we felt financially ready, in our careers we were ready, ready to take that. So, in hindsight, that was a terrible time to try to begin any new endeavor, right? The world came to a screeching halt, and the agency that we had signed with at that time, gave us some indications on timelines to match, right? There's no commitment, but here's what we're seeing on average. And that probably was true in January of 20. But as fate would have it, everything came to a halt. The matches were happening much more slowly. And so the wait time was really excruciating. If I think back to what was one of the more challenging parts, it was just the wait to match. And some of that had to do with what was going on in the world. Matches were still happening at the time, but contrast that with what I found here at Egg Donor Surrogate Solutions. And again, we came to the agency in 24, so the world had reopened in many ways. But I think the expectation that you would set with us, and the way that the matching happens here at this agency is different from the other agency. But I think the agency had said, hey, expect 6 to 9 months might be on average. And that to me felt pretty quick. I thought that's great. Even if it's in the 9-month end of the range, that's okay. And most unexpected of all, the match occurred in like 2 days. So it was a very quick match. And shout out to our surrogate, right? Because she ultimately picked us, and that's what led to that. So I thanked her profusely over the journey, at the end of the journey, even now after our baby's been here. So grateful to her. But the matching part in our first journey was a really difficult part. That's before I even met the surrogate.
Here it was. And I mean, I think wonderful. It's a good expectation to know that matching is going to take a little while, especially, if at least in our process, it's not a list. It's not you're number 25 and she's number 25. Here you go. You're matched. It is Lauren, she describes it as it's a bucket, and we're pulling you out, and we're really looking at, your preferences and, just all of those things, wanting to make a good match. And so it does, sometimes take a while. And so it is good to have, a realistic idea of, hey, a good journey might take a little bit longer in the front end. But even with COVID, even with, just all of those things, again, the fact that it took 5 years to complete a journey, I mean, I know the matching process was obviously part of that, but what else was causing such a lengthy timeline?
Sure. So in the wait process, I took matters into my own hands. And so for any parents that kind of cast as many lines as you do, I think that's a great thing to do. You're definitely, believe it or not, you're already making parenting decisions before the surrogacy journey begins by casting different lines. So at that point, I went to the Facebook, put out an ask to the universe, identified an independent surrogate, not telling the agency this whole time, right? Because I'm waiting for them to come to me with my match. So found an independent candidate, did legal independently, did psych independently, did the medical clearance independently. At this point, I am the agency. she started the medication cycle. We got 6 days out from transfer. There's one kind of appointment before transfer. That's when the fertility clinic, in so many words, said, "Hey, this is not a good situation. We don't feel comfortable putting an embryo in. That the medications didn't." I won't get into the medical piece of it, but they ultimately said this: about
Sure.
5% of all surrogates end up in this bucket, and this is just an unlucky thing. And remember the words they used, because I remember asking, like, what next? Where do we go from here? What's the next protocol? How do we make next cycle different? And they said, find another uterus. And it was a very blunt phrasing,
Wow.
and it still haunts me, but it was that direct. And so at this point, I don't have an agency, so I have to handle all of the, how do I begin to clean up this mess? And luckily, just as fate would have it, so that was a difficult piece of it. But then our other agency then happened to have a match kind of soon thereafter. And then we restarted the process with who ultimately did end up being our first surrogate. In that window between match and transfer is when we get the email from that agency that hey, we've had a misappropriation of assets. All of your money it's gone. And but stick with us, right? But stick with us, because we're going to make right by you, right? So that was in the summer of 23. Very difficult message to hear, of course. But to that agency's credit, if those of you who are impacted, if you know which agency I'm talking about, I won't use their name, because at the time, the agency owner said, trust me on this, I will bankroll all of your journeys so that no family will come out financially unscathed. I will use my personal assets. So
just to be clear, this agency had an in-house escrow situation. You were not using an outside third party.
Thank you for making that point. You're exactly right, Whitney, that this was the situation. And that was something I actually found attractive about the agency on the front end, because it was the escrows here, the matching piece is here, the legal was also in that agency as well. So I'm like, perfect for one fixed fee.
It feels convenient. It's all there. Yeah.
So ultimately then there was one bad actor in the group that had taken the money, and this is so horrifying to say, but the agency owner stepped forward and said, I will use my personal assets. And to his credit, he did. And I'm only one of the hundreds of parent couples that were impacted, but I can say I did come out financially unscathed. And so I want to make sure that I give him his credit, that he got us through it. And so I have tons of respect to him, but certainly a cautionary tale to any potential future surrogates or parents. The point, Whitney, that you made of the importance of having that third party escrow company in the mix. Because when we see these financial frauds come up, and one just happened in December, a very reputable, what we thought was a reputable agency kind of went under. There's parents right now that are impacted. My heart goes out to them. I've sat in that chair that they're sitting in. The difference being and I'm an outsider looking into this, but all accounts are that agency appears to be not acting the same way that mine did, in that they've just kind of went quiet, disappeared. And so I think the investigation is ongoing. But for those families impacted, or for any future families, just whether you do an independent journey, whether you do a journey with Egg Donor and Surrogate Solutions or any other agency, if there's one thing you take out of this podcast episode, it is to make sure that you do not proceed without a reputable third-party escrow company, because it's an insurance policy on your money to be there when it's needed.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, I think it does seem so attractive, especially in the situation that you were in of starting with one agency. I'm not hearing from them. I'm just going to go ahead and take, the bull by the horns. So you're doing all of those independent things. You're going from place to place and just trying to coordinate all of it. It sounds amazing whenever you're like, yeah, it's all here. It's all under, one umbrella. But like you said, the risk is just not worth it. And it is so important to have those checks and balances there.
Yes. For both parties, for the parents who are putting the money up, for the surrogates who are being compensated with that pot of money. We all have a stake in it. And so I'll say what got me comfortable really with egg donor and surrogate solutions was in the fallout of the financial fraud that ended up into a criminal investigation that ended up with people going to prison. The solution for us parents was, hey, we're going to use a third-party escrow company. We should have been using one from the beginning. And that company happened to be Seed Trust. And I'm not making an endorsement of them. Do your homework, folks. But when I first started doing my homework on this agency, Egg Donor Surrogate Solutions, that was one of the first questions I asked. And the response was, we work with Seed Trust. That really won this agency a lot of credibility points with me as a potential parent client, so to speak. So I know there's other escrow companies out there, not to say Seed Trust is the only one, but from experience, the 2 journeys that we did were resulted in live births, and there was no funny business with the money once Seed Trust was in the mix. So they seem to do a good job.
Well, again, I mean, it's such an emotional situation that a lot of hopeful parents are in when you are, one, you're being tasked with, phrases like go find another uterus. And so, I mean, you've got like a whole lot going on there. And then, like you said, just the ethical aspect of it, whether it is money, how people are treated, matching process, just across the board, there's a lot that's, just going into a decision of as you're collecting your trusted advisors and the people that you want to work with. And so, yes, the ethics behind something like having a third party escrow, Seed Trust, et cetera, is so important.
It's very, very important. And it's something that I put not enough stake on in the beginning, because as an intended parent comes to this process and educates themselves, at some point they're going to scratch out the numbers. One, because they're trying to figure out what this is going to cost. But 2, it's about, when do I need the money, right? At what points the fertility clinic gets paid, the surrogate gets paid, the agency, if you're working with an agency. So figuring out the cash flow is going to be a part of it. And so as you're putting those numbers together, there's a natural, inclination to want to figure out, where can we cut cost? What can we take out of the process? What can we do ourselves and save some money, right? And so that was one of the areas when I attempted our independent journey, which failed for reasons unrelated to money. But that was one of the areas I remember thinking, do I really need this? And it was the lawyers that said, no, you do need it. And so we did have it ready to go if we would have gotten to that point. But I remember looking at that cost, and it's something to the tune of, let's say, $1,300. So if I can save $1,000 on any step, I was very much of that mindset. And so I will say, for anyone who's thinking through those numbers, this is not the cost to cut. It's just not the cost to cut.
Yeah. I don't want to jump ahead, because I know there's so much more, between where you were then and where you are now. But just hearing you say that, when you are in a position of, like you said, you are trying to find every way that, you can just make this already huge financial decision, huge financial, just path, a little easier, despite your experience of doing an independent journey, working with an agency that ended up having the situation that you had in. Why didn't you cut the cost of working with an agency the second time around? Why did you decide to move forward with an agency, especially after the experience that you had just finances alone?
Sure. So the failed independent journey that we had attempted ultimately fell apart due to something that, this individual had went through medical clearance and past legal, past psych, everything was looking good. So it was this fluke thing. So to your point, Whitney, I had every reason to think, well, if I try it again with a different person, we will have a different outcome. But what I found in attempting the independent journey, and I worked full time, I have a demanding career that I work hard at to pay for what I just went through.
Sure.
But so I don't have an abundance of free time either. So there's a lot that goes into it. It's not just the legal agreement. It's not just finding the person. It's not just coordinating their travel to your fertility clinic and getting the scheduling and logistics lined up. But there's also all of these insurance pieces. There's the health insurance, the life insurance, the other insurance. There's a bunch of insurance at Egg Donor Surrogate Solutions. If you work with this agency, I'll put a big plug in. Courtney, took care of it all. It was an afterthought.
Shout out to Courtney. She's amazing.
Shout out. She really is. And made it very easy to understand, what am I paying for? Why does this matter? can I go a different route? And she talk through those decision points. I have another couple in my life. They're attempting an independent journey. They're at the point where they're thinking through insurance. And I remember a lot of this. I've been able to kind of give them little pointers, but that's one area where I'm thinking, I wish I could just refer you to Courtney to answer these questions, because I truly
Sure.
don't know. And I don't want to know. I don't want to learn all of these things. So those are the reasons why, in knowing we wanted to have two and restarting and knowing we weren't going to work with the same agency, those were the things that made an independent journey just not something I would entertain.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes a ton of sense. I love that after the experience that you had, you recognized, just what felt right for you and your family of, we do want to come alongside. We do want to have support in this area, just all of those things. What conversations did you guys have with each other as you decided, okay, we do want to move forward? And I know timeline was obviously a huge issue, because you were like, oh yeah, it's going to be another 5 years probably before we even get started, since you were calling like the day you came home from the hospital.
Yes, yeah, then that's not a superlative. The conversation. So when we came back, I knew I wanted to restart it, and my partner was very much of the thought, like, let's just give ourselves a couple months, maybe a year, to enjoy this baby that we have.
Yeah.
And so when I contacted a friend that I knew was attempting a journey, asked him who he was working with. Hey, give me, what agency have you connected with? That's how I got the name of your agency. And when I gave this agency a call for just an exploratory, just picked up the phone, what I really liked about this agency, again, what won a lot of points with me, and this was different than my other agency, different than many other agencies, is there is no money down for an intended parent like myself or others until a match is presented. So there's really no risk to start exploring with egg donor surrogate solutions. That was a very attractive piece of the organization. Of course, I loved everyone I spoke with, yourself included. It's a great group. That's not to be an understatement. Our coordinator, Allison, was present, available every step of the way. But that came after, right? That was not part of why I signed up with the agency. I didn't meet our coordinator until after we had been matched. So it was really, I think, the fee structure and how the timing of when payments were due. I thought there's no reason I wouldn't explore this agency further.
Yeah, no, for sure. We'll get right back to the show. But real quick, if you're dreaming of growing your family through egg donation or surrogacy, we'd love to help. At Egg Donor and Surrogate Solutions, we've spent 18 years guiding hopeful parents with compassion, expertise, and personal experience. Our team includes people who have been intended parents, surrogates, egg donors, and even nurses. So when we say we understand, we truly do. You can schedule a free 15-minute call with our team at createahappyfamily.com to get your questions answered and explore your next steps. You don't have to navigate this journey alone. We're here to walk it with you. All right, let's get back to the show. What were some of those non-negotiables for you, again, as you were just thinking about the experience that you had and then moving forward into a next journey? And I say non-negotiables, as well as maybe what did it look like to kind of jump off, that edge of like trusting this process again?
Mm-hmm. I remember saying to myself at the time, like, a body in motion stays in motion, a body at rest stays at rest. So I felt like, in coming home from the hospital, if I settled into this life with my new baby, the inertia that it would take to get started again a year, 2 years from now would only be harder. It would only take more effort to sort of muster up the mental bandwidth to dedicate to the process. So while we were still, it felt like, on the treadmill of what this is, just made sense to continue on. So I thought I was going to call a bunch of agencies and do my homework and compare. And really, after speaking with this agency, for the reasons that I have already mentioned, we did our onboarding call, we filled out our profile, and you all didn't even give us enough days to sort of sit with it and call another agency.
No, we sure didn't.
Presenting a wonderful match. And I remember thinking, this is a scam, because they said no money down until match. And wouldn't you know it, like days later, there's a match. And so that really was something in the back of my mind. But I'm thinking, well, the money's going to Seed Trust, so this can't be a scam. My partner at the time was really, well, my partner now and at the time was saying this is a scam. So we had the matching call, and the minute we saw the candidate like that, right when she opened her mouth, the first, I don't know what she said, but I knew this was all just a good situation, and I knew she was winning over my partner. That's really who needed to be sold on this call, because I was ready to go. But the call was so good, in going into that matching call, everyone approaches it differently. I wanted to feel like two things were going to be achieved in that hour-long Zoom call. Two big things, and one is, can I trust this person? Which, to meet a stranger and tell yourself I need to come away from an hour-long conversation thinking I can put the most precious responsibility in their hands for 9 months and all my money on the line. That's a big ask. And then two, if this all works out, 15 years from now, the baby may want to know who their surrogate was. And would that, could that baby be proud of this person sitting in front of me? What I want. And I knew right away, just meeting who ultimately became our candidate. So very strong candidate. There was really no inside debate inside our house of should we move forward here. It was really felt like a huge personal victory for me, because I was pushing this process thinking it was going to take years again, and my partner thinking let's just pump the brakes and enjoy what we've just finished. And from then on, everything just went so unbelievably smooth, much to the credit of the agency, much to the credit of the surrogate, who really holds a lot of power in how fast things do and do not move. So that was key to the match too, is I felt like she was just as motivated to move forward. And I really liked that about her. She's a really driven person, someone who I've learned a ton from as a person outside of surrogacy over the last year, and a relationship I'll definitely treasure and have, forever.
How did, you mentioned it, those two big questions, with building trust and, with fostering a relationship. How did expectations and trust get built from the beginning? Both, you kind of mentioned how it started with the agency, but how did that trust kind of continue to evolve? And then also, how did that evolve with your surrogate?
So with the agency, the trust, I really didn't. So coming out of just a very unique experience with a prior agency, I'll be honest, I didn't view Egg Donor Surrogate Solutions as like the key player here. I was viewing the agency as like, you're just a party I need to work with, and my ultimate goal here. And so and that changed over the course of the year, and really it was just a set of steps. Hey, this is the next step. We'll get back to you in 2 days. Sure enough, they got back in 2 days. You guys got back in 2 days. Just all the little steps, everything just happened as you said it would, for the pieces that you can control. There's a number of things you can't control. So I'm not going to hold any agency to that expectation. And if you're listening to this thinking my journey didn't go that way, the things that happen at the fertility clinic, of course, it's outside the realm of anyone's control. But that established a good sense of trust. Allison, I really did feel like was invested in us, and I didn't ever really need her to invest in me, but I really wanted to know she was taking care of the surrogate, like that the surrogate was supported, and that the surrogate, if she was feeling something, she may not want to come to the intended parents about it, because there's an interesting dynamic in the beginning. So feeling like is Allison, our coordinator, the person working with both us and the surrogate from the agency, is this someone that I think can be a source of direction in the conversations that we're not a part of, because the surrogate's looking to lean on her in conversations that we just wouldn't be a party to. So I felt really good about that. But very quickly the relationship shifts over to sort of just, it's us and the surrogate. And the communication, I'll say, through the pregnancy. I'm a very high anxiety person. I heard this theme on other podcast episodes that you've all done with other parents, in that we're always waiting for the shoe to drop. Because of the things that have occurred before, we're always waiting for the bad news. We're always waiting for the thing that didn't go right. And And so that anxiety sort of never goes away. And so through all of it, I'm doing my best to sort of manage it, not put that anxiety onto the surrogate.
Yeah.
And so we got into a rhythm of we're gonna talk every Sunday. Text, it's a text, a few texts, not a big time commitment, but it's that consistency that then on Tuesday, when I didn't hear from her, I wasn't worrying to think, oh, yeah, this is different. This is something's going on, right?
Yeah.
So that was a little thing that we did that worked for the three of us because we're all working adults here to not ask too much time of one another, but also to sort of have that weekly check in. And again, it was in many weeks just a few texts, so not asking for a big time commitment. She's a mom, she has responsibilities outside of work to her kids. Very sensitive to not wanting to ask her ever to spend time away from that to comfort me, right? Like that's not not the ask that we want. So it really was just over time, and then by the end, of course, the hospital experience is in both cases was just a once in a lifetime, well, twice in a lifetime experience. But that really solidified like, this is someone who, right, wrong, or otherwise, we're going to be in our lives forever. And both of our surrogates live in different states, so that commitment, that time commitment, looks different. But
Hmm.
it's someone that I want to have in my life. It's not a relationship that I feel that I need to tend to. It's one of those relationships that we have where I retreat to when life is stressful. Let me send a
Mm.
text and a baby picture to the surrogate. Let's tap back into like that positive feeling and that sense of there's someone out there in the world that will always be there to revel in this thing that we just accomplished together.
That's beautiful. I I love that you recognized what you needed as far as communication and were able to feel like you could have that conversation, with your surrogate and kind of that expectation. But then I also really love that, again, minimally it's Sunday, but like you said, it has evolved and it is that relationship that, to quote you, that you retreat to. I mean,
Mhm.
it's so beautiful what can feel like just the biggest leap of faith, how that can really just turn into something so just one of a kind and special.
It's very that. I don't know if you have any like I think of it like many people have a lot of cousins, but you have that one
Sure.
cousin, you're going to the family holiday, maybe you haven't seen him in 6 months, maybe you saw him yesterday, but you get to the thing and you make eye contact and you just know you're going to cut it up and have a good time. And like that one
Mhm.
relationship, and it's this relationship again, you don't have to tend to it. It's not this heavy commitment. It's this source of positivity that if
Yeah.
you would have told me at the beginning 5 6 years ago when we started this that that's what would come of this, I would have never believed it. I would have thought I want a closed surrogacy where we're going to do the process and then we leave the hospital and then we never look back. That's what I
Sure.
would have thought would have felt right to me.
Mm.
So that's a surprising kind of twist. And I think until the matching call happens, I'm sure many people feel that way because you don't know who the other person is on
Yeah.
the other side of that relationship. But I think for many of us, once you meet that person and you go through this magical experience, how can you not want to hold on to that, success story? It's that feeling of great gratuity that will never. I hope it never goes away. I hope that never leaves me. I hope I always feel just as, to take your words, my cup is full, overflowing, the same way I felt leaving the hospital. I hope that is always kind of there and a source of happiness that I can tap into when the babies are awake at 3 a.m. for the last 3.5 months.
For sure. For sure. I mean, again, just thinking back to where you were and then where you are now. I know, in talking with Allie, I know she had heard you say that this experience, has been a night and day difference. When you say that, what were the things that made those journeys just feel like such a huge contrast?
Yes, I would say in both cases, when I contrast the two experiences, it was everything that happened from transfer onward. A lot of that is really out of the agency's hands, and so
Yeah.
those from that point forward, it's really in the surrogate and the fertility clinic and fate's hands. Those the journeys were very similar and wonderful. Both pregnancies were
Yeah.
healthy pregnancies. Both surrogates are people that we will have in our lives forever. Their extended families were there to receive us, and it was
Oh.
just all of the wonderful things. But from prior to transfer, when really the agency is there to sort of get you to transfer, and kind of what happens after that is we'll see. That's where the night and day differences were, and really the diligence piece of it. I really everything's very similar, right? So it's very familiar. There's a matching call. There's the timing of the payments is a little different, but the total payments were the same. The size of the agencies, from what I could tell, were the same. And before the fraud happened, I think back to that first journey, that just waiting for a match was just a really painful process. And I felt like, and I didn't have to endure any of that here, which I'm so thankful for, and really colors how I view the
Sure.
agency. But even still, right? Every month we'd get one email. Here's how many surrogates moved into this phase. Here's how many matches we made. And to your point, this was one of those list-based matching scenarios. So your number was this last month. You were 83. Now you're 81. It's like, well, okay, so that was a month. So if I just move two spaces in 1 month, I can do the math. Like this is not going well. So after a number of months of that and seeing the matching going as slow as it was, I felt like the agency really wasn't sort of defending themselves to say, here's what we're doing to try to keep things moving. Because at this point, this agency was not the same as you in that they did expect an upfront payment and then another payment at match. So another point of consternation in that wait, if I really think about it, was, hey, this agency has a big chunk of my money. And I understood that there was maybe going to be a few months, up to a year wait, but we're now going into year 3 of waiting, and you're sitting on my money. That starts
Wow.
to grind at a parent. You're thinking, either give me my money back or where's the match? And so that builds over time, and that's another reason why, if a parent's doing their homework on agencies, don't underestimate how that can start to feel, how that money piece can start to feel in the wait. And so if you're waiting with this agency, Egg Donor Surrogate Solutions, the beauty is they don't have your money, so that wait doesn't feel as bad, right? It's easier to endure that wait because you're not financially entangled with the agency. And I'd say that's a big distinction point, that if anyone's exploring this agency, to not underestimate the importance of how the fee structure plays into the psyche of the wait.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and then I feel like it also almost puts you in a situation where you have been waiting for so long, you have money tangled up, you're finally being presented with a surrogate. And I'm not saying this was your scenario, but I feel like it can be a situation where things that you were, you had a standard that you were, or, expectations or whatever. There's a part of you that's like, well, I've been waiting so long, I'll just let that slide. Or
Yeah.
I'm kind of getting a little bit of a red flag feeling, but we're on year 3. Let's just go ahead. And you
Yep.
start
Start
kind of,
compromising on things that are very
yeah,
important. Like start rethinking, do I want to change wherever you landed on termination? It's a decision that you're going to establish with the agency of,
sure.
hey, with a match, if something were to happen, would these medical reasons lead you to terminate that pregnancy or not? These are tough discussions that happen up front. So in that wait, to your point, Whitney, it's, do you start rethinking, have I been too selective in some of these really
Mm-hmm.
important criteria? Should I back off of that thing that I thought was important to me, because that would allow me to be a better match to more surrogates? And you start to sort of
Sure.
negotiate with yourself on things that honestly you should not negotiate with. You make your decision, what are your values, you land on it, cool. There's going to be a surrogate out there that's going to match you. The more prescriptive you are, of course, the harder it is to find that perfect surrogate, but you don't want to back off of that, because then you get to transfer and then you're 3 months in, and that's a very stressful place to be of, if something were to come up, are we aligned in what happens next?
Yeah, for sure. If for someone who is maybe coming off of a difficult experience and wondering whether to try again, what would you want to tell them?
Yes. If it's to all the families that are impacted by the fraud that is unfolding at the agency on the West
Yeah.
Coast, or to someone who may have just endured a failed embryo transfer, for all of the things that we went through, both of our transfers worked. So, I will never, take that for granted. But whatever the hardship is, thinking back to, why did you start this process, and just keep pushing forward. And that's easier said than done. And also to the GCs, if there is a failed transfer, like one of my biggest things that I was so worried about every step of the way, and I heard this mentioned on another one of your episodes, was anytime something wouldn't go right, I was always worried that the GC would say, you know what, like, this is actually just more than I signed up for. Like, I'm going to back out. Like, thank you for picking, but I've had enough, right? Because there's always that, from the IP's perspective, that concern, because let's face it, the surrogates are doing all of the work here, all of the medical protocols, all of the appointments, all of the, so as much as we can do in trying to make it as easy as possible, like there's not much we
Sure,
really
it's a physical toll. Just,
yes.
Yeah.
And so the agency being wrapped around that helps. Another reason why I caution against an independent journey is that concern is only louder when you don't have the agency. When I didn't feel like, if something were to go wrong, there isn't an Allison there to kind of keep us all together and put us on that right path. That's another point, Whitney, that I think is a big proponent for, of course, this agency, but to have an agency partner, is there is that person to sort of make sure that people don't just back away. If they want to back away, go ahead. But I always felt like the risk of that, if it were to happen, I wouldn't be the only one kind of at the table sorting through that. There would be someone there with me. There'd be someone there with the surrogate independently to provide counsel or to think about what happened next. But I've heard many people say that every journey is different. Everything's unexpected. In this second journey with this agency, there was no surprises. There was no detours. There was no, this didn't happen, so we got to repeat this step. And so for the things that were in this agency's control, like, all credit to you and your team, that it was a very well executed process. We had luck on our side at the fertility clinic. I'm so thankful for that. We had a surrogate who was very, process oriented and driven. I'm that way, and I felt like she was even more that way than I was, which I really liked and respect about her. So I don't know if that quite hits the question, but the hard parts of this are hard.
I think you're highlighting something so important, is, as much as the escrow piece is really important, and as much as, we appreciate having the Courtneys in the world being able to explain, insurance and all of those things, at the end of the day, one of the greatest aspects of, what an agency, and I think, what obviously Allie showed that, we do well, is that relationship, that support, that,
Yes.
being there for when you do feel like the other shoe is about to drop, or when you are having those fears, or when you are, just needing a little bit of support, encouragement, just all of those things. And that support aspect is so important when you're doing a journey like this.
Absolutely. And as you're talking about that, if I think about the time when Allie really came through for me personally, and again, I always viewed Allison, our coordinator's role, as really, she's there for the surrogate. And then anytime I'm taking her time, it's taking her away from what I really wanted to be focused on, which is making sure the surrogate.
And I want to just say, like, I know you viewed it that way, but I hope you know that is not how it's, like, we're here for everyone.
Yes, no, 1,000%. That was me being in my head. But the time when I think back to Allison really came through for us was, so there's this point, if you've never been through this yet, where there's the embryo transfer, and then referred to as the 2 week wait. And then
Mm-hmm.
a woman, if she's going through IVF or the surrogate, and goes in for this blood test to confirm the pregnancy. So there's this period in there. In the first journey, I didn't know this, but in that 10-day, 12-day window, women can test with at-home tests, and they can
Sure.
get an idea of which way this is going. So there was really no thought process around that the first time, because I thought the blood test is the first test that would tell you, but that's not true. So for the second time around, I knew there was a chance that the surrogate could at-home test. And so there was this discussion prior to transfer, do you want the surrogate to test at home? And do you want her to tell you? And I remember thinking, I want her to decide what she's going to do. If she wants to test or not test, whatever makes her feel the most comfortable. But I want to know if it's a yes, but I don't want to know if it's a no, if that makes sense. And it's like very, so then, right, we get 7 days into this 10-day wait, and now I'm rethinking this of, she hasn't said
Sure.
anything, but I also don't even know if she's testing, because I also left that to kind of be in her court. So I remember reaching out to Allison and sort of like talking out of both sides of my mouth to say, like, do you know if she's tested? Do you remember that I said I didn't want to know if it's not good? But like, how do you answer that question? Because then you don't want to be. And however she finessed it, she ultimately like threaded the needle to the point where the surrogate then shared with us that the tests were looking good, and it sort of like eliminated the stress of that final few days of the wait, which 3 days
Yeah.
of stress seems like nothing, but in that moment it's an eternity. And so I
Oh,
don't know
100%.
how she managed to land that plane, but that's something we're just having that person there to sort of like thread that needle. Yeah, that was a good day, getting that kind of first soft preliminary, it's a positive, it's looking good type of text from our surrogate. That was a very happy
Yeah.
moment.
It's the best. And I mean, you're so right. Like, that is just the longest 10, 12 days of, just this, I feel like all of it. But
Yes.
I think you're hitting on something I feel like just so important is, if like you and your partner can go back and forth about this all day long, but you're both, in the emotional, just, piece of it. And to have, a support like Allie, where she can sit there and talk it with you and, just like you said, land the plane beautifully to where everybody is feeling comfortable and taking away, that pressure and that concern and worry. You can have friends all day long and you can have doctors, but there's something really unique and special about someone who is there to love and support you but isn't in the midst of the emotions of it.
Yes. Yes. And a
For
lot of
sure.
the women at this agency are former surrogates. I believe
Hmm.
she knew the process inside and out. So there's also something to your point of, you can kind of bounce ideas off of. I felt like I could bounce ideas or things I'm worried about with Allison, and I didn't need to explain myself, because she had already
Yeah.
worked with intended parents as a surrogate. She sort of knew the dynamics, let alone her role with the agency in working with couples like myself and surrogates in a professional setting, as the coordinator. So that is a very nice element that I've found here that I don't think was the case in my prior agency. I can't quite remember, but I liked that here was I really didn't need to explain myself. I felt like we could just start the conversations wherever I wanted to start, and the folks that I was talking to at this agency just kind of knew the context or knew why I was inquiring about certain things, or why I would be interested in certain different pieces of this puzzle. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's an efficient and well executed operation. So you all do a very nice job. If I haven't said that enough.
Well, I mean, I'm going to take the compliments all day long. I love it so much. But I do want to ask you, when you think about Lauren someday hearing her story, what do you hope she knows about how intentionally she was brought into this world and
Yes.
became part of your family?
Yes. So Lawrence is also and we're very transparent about this, that my partner and I both created embryos, and we
Hmm.
let the clinic decide who was going to be the first transfer. Ultimately, the first one happened to be my DNA. And so I do find a lot of pride in the sense that for Lauren, who is ultimately my partner's DNA, they both have the same egg donor. So they are biologically got some overlap there, but I'm very proud of the fact that at the end of this, feel like I spearheaded what ultimately led to her journey by calling this agency and doing all the homework and quarterbacking all of the pieces that fall on the intended parents, which again is much fewer items than what falls on the surrogate. But that I really drove that process. So even though, Lauren, I'm not your DNA, I do feel like that I made you. So shout out to me on that one. But that maybe when I was doing the diligence on my prior agency, I asked them for 3 former clients, and I called each one of them up because I wanted to ask them their experience before I signed with them.
Yeah.
And I don't know anything about this guy, but I remember we had a Zoom call, and it was one of the people they referred us to. And I asked him a few questions, and they had one. They were a same-sex couple, had one child through IVF and surrogacy with the agency that I was looking into. And at that point, we were thinking that I was just going to make embryos because we were in this cost phase of like, where can we cut costs? Well, if 2 of us make embryos, it's really twice as expensive. So we're thinking, well, maybe I'll just make them and then we'll see how it goes. And then if it's good, my partner will do it later. And then we realized if we did that, there was not a chance or as easy of a chance of having the same egg donor. So we were kind of on the fence of like, how, and he said to me, he's like, if I could go back and do it all over again, because they did what I just described, where only one of them created embryos. And so they only had one child. And he had said, if I could do it over again, I wish my partner would have created embryos, because as much as he's, a great dad and all of that, there's something very poignant about looking at your child and seeing a shadow or a shade of yourself in them. And I really want that for him. And I wish, and I remember he gave me that advice, and it was just a message I did not want to hear at the time, because again, it put in my mind of 2 sets of embryos or now 2 journeys or maybe a twins journey. How is this going to be? But I took that advice, like I took that conversation, held on to it. We ultimately created embryos, and it ultimately then, led to who is now Lauren today. So it was that one conversation that set off the series of events that is her birth story. And to anyone listening to this podcast, if you're doing your homework and you take one nugget from whatever me and Whitney have talked about, maybe it's not that story, maybe it's something else, but it's really important to do all of the investigation on, Whitney, to your point, the vendor partners that you'll end up working with. And in those exploratory conversations that I had with this individual, and I've never spoken with him again. He has no idea what came of our story after this, but it was that one conversation, that one nugget of wisdom that I didn't want to hear at the time that then led to us rethinking how we're going to approach embryos. So 6 years later, here she is. And so that's maybe what I want Lauren, if she ever hears this story, to know, is that even though I'm not your DNA, like I will always, even if, before you're even a figment of our imagination, I was in there figuring it out. And now I'm so happy that you're here.
Mic drop. You're loved, Lauren.
I love her. And funny, there's a Lauren at the agency who does a great thing. And there's an Allison at the agency. Our other daughter's named Allison. So it's like, I don't know. Like I use Allison and Lauren quite often, but they're 2 of the wonderful people that you will meet at this agency if you work with
There you go. I'm loving it. Your little Allison and little Lauren are like our little poster children. I love it so much. I do. You kind of, you touched on it a little bit. I think there's a lot of aspects with, going through a journey as a same-sex male couple. And, it's those little things, like you said, of, twice as expensive if you're going to make double embryos and, and all of those things. And I know you were ultimately given, that wisdom of, creating the embryos the way that you did. Do you have, any advice, maybe especially for intended, parents that are a same-sex couple, maybe early on in their journey, that you wish you had known before you had even started?
Definitely the think long and hard about the embryo creation piece. Like it's hard to imagine that if you're sitting there having not started, it's hard to imagine a future state with 1 kid, let alone 2. But those decisions you make right at the beginning may shape whether, if you do have 2, that do they share that egg donor if that's important to you. I think the agency does a nice job shielding us from what probably are distinctions. I know that there are some surrogates who don't want to carry for same-sex couples, or some that do want to, and some that are indifferent. That's another reason to work with an agency if you're a same-sex couple, is you don't even need to get into those weeds. The agency sort of
Sure.
handles all of that behind the scenes in a way that feels good. Um, and then, yeah, so for all the same-sex couples out there that are going to pursue it, I'm rooting for you. That's the thing, and I keep coming back to this fraud that just happened in December, and it's so triggering and so personal to me, partially because
Yeah.
we endured something similar, but truthfully, my daughter's origin stories forever now will be rooted in the concept of IVF and surrogacy. And so, although we are done, we've completed our family, we're moving on. I will always be a part of this industry, or this community, if you will. And so it's very important to me that agencies and fertility clinics continue to operate in a way that keeps this concept of surrogacy and IVF in our society viewed as positive ways in which families who need to rely on this to create a family. And so when things like what we're seeing unfold with the agency on the West Coast occur, it feels like a betrayal against everyone who has had a positive experience with IVF in the past. And that's why I'm watching how this plays out. And so for all of the couples, again, that were impacted, just know that there's a bunch of other couples like me out here that are also watching to make sure that this comes to its rightful conclusion as the investigation is occurring. I don't want to belabor that, because that's a horror story that we don't need to dwell on. But it's one of these things where it's important to me that even though we're done, that this remains a space for other families in the future to turn to, maybe when all the other doors have been closed, and can realize their dreams in the same way that me and my partner were fortunate enough to have that benefit of. So I will always feel like I have a vested interest and a stake in ensuring that agencies like yours and wonderful women who decide to be surrogates are also, view this as something that is a positive thing. And so bad actors can just take one bad seed to poison the well. I think that's why it feels like it's hitting so close to home, right now.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, you're so right, because it feels like you have to combat so much, when you're even on a journey. Then you get questions, and then you see, news headlines and all of those things. And, I love your passion for having experienced where you were and experienced, where you are now, that these things, it is possible to have an ethical, safe, beautiful, supported journey. And just like you said, continuing to voice that this can be a reality, and what you see in the headline is not a representation of what this industry is and can be.
Absolutely.
So
Yes.
yeah. No, I so appreciate that. Well, again, Monroe, I am so grateful to you to come and share your story. And I love that you have such a beautiful, happy ending. You know what's coming, since I know you did your research, but I've been sitting here having, I won't tell you. I won't tell you what number coffee this is, but I will always ask, what filled your cup today? Literally or figuratively, what has been the thing that has filled your cup?
So it is still morning here, so the day is young. But what has filled my cup today is, and this is my favorite part of the morning, is getting, so my eldest, she's 18 months now, so she goes to daycare. My favorite part of the morning is getting her dressed. She's still young enough and open-minded enough to let me pick out her clothes. So what filled my cup this morning was just getting to just make her looking cute, as beautiful as possible. And then, daycare was closed today because of the winter advisory. But then I love logging into the daycare app and seeing what all the other kids are doing and seeing her play with them. And so that's what filled my cup this morning, was just getting her ready for daycare, getting her into a cute little outfit. And I'm telling you, kids, people say it's so expensive but kids' clothes, if you go to the right, I'm not shopping at the boutiques here, we're going to the Walmarts. They're cheap. So
Oh
like
yeah.
it's just fun. It's very, very fun. I don't want to dwell on how wonderful parenthood is, because if you're listening to this, you're probably still trying to get here. But once you reach the promised land, I'm telling you, it is as good as you can imagine. So that's what filled my cup this morning, was putting on her little outfit, and yeah.
But I love that. That's the little stuff. That's the memories. That's the stuff that, you just hold on to. I'll never forget, because my dad was also the one that got me ready for daycare in the morning, and I went through a period of time where I only wanted to wear this one pink dress, and dear sweet dad washed it every night and brought it to me every morning, and he would let me twirl. And I've never felt like a more beautiful princess. So I
Shout out to
know that
dad.
that is, dads are awesome like that. I love it. I love it so much. That just makes me so happy. Well, again, thank you so much. I mean, you have walked two different journeys, both ending with, just beautiful, amazing daughters. And I so appreciate your willingness to share what you learned. And I am loving that Meg called you out so early for it. So shout out to her for sure.
Yes.
But
Thank you for
truly,
having me.
I know that this is just going to be so helpful to so many. So thank you so much.